Emma and Riley's apartment was a sanctuary of laughter and love, a cozy third-floor walk-up in the heart of the city. Mornings began with the rich aroma of fresh coffee percolating in the kitchen, mingling with the sound of Riley's off-key singing drifting from the shower. Emma would roll her eyes as she sliced fruit at the counter, but her smile betrayed her affection. "You're going to scare the neighbors," she'd call out, and Riley would poke their head out, dripping wet, grinning like a fool. They were a team, tackling life's challenges with a shared sense of humor and unwavering support. 8 years together, 5 of them married, had woven their lives into a tapestry of inside jokes, weekend rituals, and dreams for the future. They were the couple friends envied, the ones who finished each other's sentences and still held hands at dinner parties, their fingers interlaced as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Emma worked as a graphic designer, her creativity spilling into their home's eclectic decor. Vibrant throw pillows, abstract art she'd painted herself, a bookshelf stuffed with dog-eared novels and design magazines. Riley, a marketing consultant, brought a pragmatic balance to her artistic chaos. They complemented each other perfectly, or so Emma thought. She'd sketch late into the night, lost in a world of color and shape, while Riley pored over spreadsheets muttering about client deadlines. Their evenings were spent cooking together, debating the merits of Riley's latest playlist, always too heavy on indie rock for Emma's taste, or planning their next adventure. They had a rhythm, a cadence that felt effortless, honed over years of shared mornings and quiet nights. Once they'd been reckless dreamers. On their first date, Riley had taken Emma to a hole-in-the-wall diner, confessing over greasy fries that they wanted to see the world. She'd laughed, charmed by their earnestness, and by their third date, they'd mapped out a fantasy trip. Paris, Tokyo, a tiny village in Tuscany. They never made it past a weekend in Montreal, but the planning was half the fun. Now, settled into their mid-30s, those dreams had softened into something more practical. A house with a yard, maybe a dog, a life built brick by brick. But beneath the surface, even the strongest foundations can crack, and Emma was about to discover just how fragile theirs had become. Cracks in the facade. The first sign was subtle, almost dismissible, a faint ripple in their placid routine. About 4 months ago, Riley started keeping their phone close at all times. Before, it would lie forgotten on the counter, screen dark, as they chopped vegetables or sprawled on the couch watching old sitcoms. Now, Riley carried it everywhere, into the bathroom, out to grab the mail, even during their rare date nights, when it sat face down on the table like a silent third wheel. One evening, as they prepped tacos in the kitchen, Emma teased, "What's with the phone? Planning a heist or something?" Riley chuckled, but it sounded hollow, a forced note in their usual harmony. "Just keeping up with some group chats," they said, eyes flicking away to the cutting board. Emma brushed it off, but a tiny crack formed in her trust, a hairline fracture she couldn't quite see. Then came the lock screen. Riley had never bothered with a password. Emma could grab their phone to order pizza or snap a goofy selfie without a second thought. But one Saturday, as they lounged on the balcony with coffee, she noticed them typing one in, their thumb moving swiftly across the screen. Curious, she asked, "Since when do you lock your phone?" Riley shrugged, sipping their drink. "Oh, you know, privacy stuff. Work's been pushing security lately." It was plausible. Riley's firm had been buzzing about a data breach. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Their job had never demanded such caution before, and Riley's nonchalance felt rehearsed. Other changes crept in, slow and insidious. Riley began stepping out to take calls, closing the bedroom door behind them, or wandering onto the balcony with a murmured, "Be right back." If Emma inquired, the answer was always vague. "Just catching up with someone." Or, "Work thing, nothing big." Their once-open conversations grew clipped, punctuated by silences that stretched too long. When Emma brought up their usual plans, like a summer trip to the coast or saving for that house, Riley deflected. "Let's figure it out later," they'd say, avoiding her gaze, their fingers tapping restlessly on the table. She told herself it was stress. Riley had been swamped with a new campaign, but the excuses piled up, heavy as stones. The tipping point came on a rainy Thursday, the sky a slate-gray curtain over the city. Riley had mentioned grabbing drinks with a coworker after hours, a casual outing to unwind. Emma, finishing a late shift at her studio nearby, decided to drop by and join them, a spontaneous gesture she hadn't thought twice about in years. But when she arrived at the bar, Riley wasn't inside with a colleague, laughing over beers. Instead, they stood under an awning across the street, phone pressed to their ear, pacing in the drizzle. Emma watched from her car, rain streaking the windshield, blurring the edges of Riley's form. She couldn't hear much over the patter of drops, but words like soon and a clean break drifted through the damp air, sharp and deliberate. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't a work call, this was something else. That night, Riley returned home with a breezy story about their co-workers' promotion drama, a tale of office politics and petty rivalries. The words flowed effortlessly, too effortlessly, polished like a script. Emma nodded along, stirring a pot of soup she'd thrown together, but her mind churned. What was Riley hiding? She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a surprise, a gift or a trip they were planning in secret. Riley had always loved grand gestures, like the time they'd surprised her with a weekend at a cabin, complete with a lopsided cake they'd baked themselves. But this felt different, heavier. The unease lingered, a shadow over their once bright home, settling into the cracks of her doubt. She lay awake that night, Riley's steady breathing beside her a stark contrast to the storm in her head. The phone sat on the nightstand, its locked screen a taunting mystery. She wanted to grab it, punch in every code she could think of, Riley's birthday, their anniversary, the year they'd met. But she didn't. Not yet. Trust was a fragile thing, and she wasn't ready to shatter it completely. But the seed had been planted, and it was growing fast. The next evening, Riley dropped a bombshell, casual as if they were suggesting a new restaurant. They were lounging in the living room, a half-watched movie flickering on the TV, when Riley said, "Hey, I was thinking we should get our financial stuff organized. You know, list out our accounts, passwords, all that. Just to be safe." Emma froze, her fork hovering over her plate of stir-fry, the soy sauce dripping onto the cushion. "Safe from what?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral, though her pulse quickened. Riley waved a hand, dismissive. "Life's unpredictable, right? What if something happens and we need quick access to everything? It's just practical." They smiled, but it didn't reach their eyes. It sounded logical, a responsible adult move, but the timing gnawed at Emma. Why now, after years of casual money management, shared accounts, a loose budget, the occasional splurge on concert tickets or a new gadget? She agreed to think about it, her voice steady, but suspicion bloomed, wild and unchecked. That night, she replayed every odd moment, the phone, the calls, the bar, each one a thread in a tapestry she didn't want to see finished. Was Riley planning something big? Something that didn't include her? The following morning, with Riley at work, Emma sat at her desk, laptop glowing in the dim light. She wasn't sure what she'd find, but she logged into their shared bank account, her fingers trembling as she typed the password. The screen loaded, and the numbers told a story she hadn't expected. Over the past 6 weeks, small amounts had trickled out. $50 here, $200 there, nothing huge, but enough to notice. The transactions weren't linked to their usual expenses. No grocery runs, no utility bills, just vague labels like miscellaneous or cash withdrawal. Her breath caught. Where was the money going? She scrolled back further, but the pattern held, subtle, steady, a slow bleed from their life together. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She needed advice, someone to tell her she wasn't losing her mind. She called her cousin, Jordan, a financial advisor with a no-nonsense streak and a knack for cutting through bullshit. They met at a quiet cafe downtown, the clink of cups and murmur of conversation a soft backdrop to Emma's unraveling world. Over steaming lattes, she spilled everything. Riley's behavior, the missing cash, the sudden interest in their finances. Jordan leaned back, arms crossed, her sharp eyes narrowing as she listened. "Look," Jordan said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I'm not saying you're wrong to worry. People don't change habits like that for no reason. If you're scared, lock things down now. You can always undo it later if it's nothing." Emma frowned, clutching her mug. Lock it down how? Jordan outlined a plan. Move the bulk of their assets, savings, investments, even their apartment's equity, into a safe place, like a trust or a relative's name. It was drastic, a sledgehammer to a problem she couldn't fully define, but Emma couldn't ignore the dread pooling in her chest. She thought of their first date, Riley's shy smile over those diner fries, the promises they'd made under a starry sky. How had it unraveled so fast? She'd built her life around Riley, switched jobs to follow their career, moved cities, put her own dreams on hold to nurture theirs. And now, this. It feels like betrayal, she admitted, voice small. Jordan reached across the table, squeezing her hand. It's not betrayal if you're protecting yourself. Trust your gut, Em. You've always been smarter than you give yourself credit for. That afternoon, with Riley out, Emma sat at her desk. The laptop's hum the only sound in the silent apartment. Her fingers hesitated over the keys, but she pushed through, logging into their accounts one by one. She transferred most of their wealth, $80,000 in savings, a chunk of investments, the apartment's equity, into her brother's name, leaving just enough in their joint account to avoid questions. Each click felt like a betrayal of her own, a severing of the life they'd built. When it was done, she stared at the screen, the confirmation emails pinging in her inbox like tiny accusations. Her throat tightened with guilt, but she couldn't undo it now. When Riley got home, Emma suggested takeout and a movie, masking her turmoil with a grin that felt brittle. Riley seemed oblivious, chatting about their day as if nothing had changed, their laughter filling the space between them. For 10 days, Emma lived a double life, smiling through dinners while watching Riley for clues, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. Riley's mood brightened, their old charm resurfacing, which only deepened her unease. Were they relieved, thinking their plan was working? Or was she imagining it all? Then, on a crisp Saturday evening, Riley turned off the TV mid-movie and faced her, their expression unreadable. Emma, we need to talk. Her heart sank, a stone dropping into a well. I've been thinking, Riley said, voice steady. And I don't think this is working anymore. I want a divorce. The words landed like a punch, knocking the air from her lungs, but Riley kept going. I feel like I've given up a lot to make this work, and I need something new. Emma blinked, stung. Given up a lot? She'd rearranged her life for Riley, uprooted herself, sidelined her career, poured her soul into their shared dreams. Anger flared, hot and bright, but she swallowed it, her face a mask of calm. Okay, she said quietly, if that's what you want. Riley faltered, clearly expecting a fight, a tearful plea. Emma's composure threw them off, but she was already planning her next move. She needed to know the full story, to see the shape of the betrayal she'd only glimpsed. Calm before the storm. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, delivered by a courier in a crisp envelope. Emma tore it open, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. The demands were ruthless. Riley wanted half the savings, the apartment, even support payments, despite earning more than her. It confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't impulsive, a spur-of-the-moment decision born of frustration. Riley had been plotting this, step by step, a calculated dismantling of their life together. The phone calls, the money, the locked screen, it all clicked into place, a puzzle she'd been too afraid to solve. She turned detective, her grief hardening into resolve. On Riley's social media, a name kept popping up. Casey. Casey's likes and comments littered Riley's posts, subtle but consistent, a breadcrumb trail Emma couldn't ignore. She dug into Casey's profile, public, thankfully, and found a photo from the same bar, time-stamped the night she'd seen Riley outside, pacing in the rain. Another post showed Casey in a space that looked suspiciously like Riley's new rental, a sleek studio they'd moved into temporarily after the announcement. Her gut screamed, "Affair." The pieces fit too neatly. Riley's secrecy, the missing cash, the sudden push for financial clarity. She remembered a moment from their 3rd anniversary, Riley surprising her with a homemade dinner, burnt garlic bread and undercooked pasta, a disaster they'd laughed over until tears streamed down their faces. They'd vowed to take cooking classes together, a promise that never materialized. Now, the memory felt like a cruel joke, a relic of a love she'd trusted implicitly. She called their friend Mia, a mutual confidant who'd always been terrible at keeping secrets. Over the phone, Emma fished for info, her tone casual. "Hey, has Riley mentioned anything weird lately? They've been off." Mia dodged at first, hemming and hawing about work stress, but after a second call, she caved. "Promise you won't say I told you," she whispered, her voice tight. Emma agreed and Mia spilled. Riley had been with Casey for months, a coworker who'd wormed their way into Riley's life. Casey had pushed Riley to leave, painting Emma as the obstacle to their happiness, a controlling weight holding Riley back. The divorce was supposed to fund their fresh start, new apartment, new life, until Riley learned the assets were gone, a revelation Mia had overheard in a heated rant. "They're pissed, Em," Mia said. "Casey's furious the money's not there." Emma hung up, her hands shaking. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a scheme, a cold-blooded plan to strip her bare and walk away. She stared at the wilting plant on her windowsill, a gift from Riley she'd been trying to save, its leaves drooping despite her care. It felt like a mirror to their marriage, something she'd nurtured, only to watch it die. When the dust settled, Emma kept what was hers, financially and emotionally. The legal battle was swift. Riley's demands fell apart without the assets to back them, and they retreated, tail between their legs. Emma sold the apartment, the sanctuary she'd once loved, and moved into a small loft across town, a blank slate to rebuild on. The scars remained, trust shattered, years lost, but she was wiser now, her eyes open to the fragility of promises. She stood on her new balcony one evening, the city sprawling below, and thought of the lessons carved into her soul. Trust was a gift, not a given, and she'd never let it blind her again. The future stretched out, uncertain but hers to shape. She'd start small, a new project, a trip, maybe that dog she'd always wanted. The plant was gone, tossed out with the past, but she'd buy another, one she'd tend with care and watch thrive. It was a quiet victory, a step toward something stronger. When the dust settled, Emma kept what was hers, financially and emotionally. The legal battle was swift. Riley's demands fell apart without the assets to back them, and they retreated, tail between their legs. Emma sold the apartment, the sanctuary she'd once loved, and moved into a small loft across town, a blank slate to rebuild on. The scars remained, trust shattered, years lost, but she was wiser now, her eyes open to the fragility of promises. She stood on her new balcony one evening, the city sprawling below, and thought of the lessons carved into her soul. Trust was a gift, not a given, and she'd never let it blind her again. The future stretched out, uncertain but hers to shape. She'd start small, a new project, a trip, maybe that dog she'd always wanted. The plant was gone, tossed out with the past, but she'd buy another, one she'd tend with care and watch thrive. It was a quiet victory, a step toward something stronger.